It's actually not even designated a park. It's considered a zoological facility. And the city sold it to the county decades ago. Probably wouldn't exist today, quite frankly, if the county didn't take it over and manage it. And as long as it's being run as a zoo, the county will continue to own it. There is a reversion clause in the deed that says if it's no longer a zoo, the city could take it back over. So anyway, so it's been a zoo. They've made lots of changes over the years and additions. There was a proposal in front of the county commission to do some additional work. A number of the neighbors were not happy with that, and so they filed a request to the Historic Preservation Commission for the City Commission to create a study commission to designate the zoo historic. It's a little unusual because typically it's the property owner that's engaged and asked for historic preservation. The county was very clear that they are opposed to the zoo being considered a historically designated site. Because then it would create a whole nother layer that any time they wanted to do something in the future, they'd have to also go through the Historic Preservation Commission. So there was ample feedback from the county in their opposition. And as the City Commission debated the issue, so after the Historic Preservation makes a recommendation for a study commission, it goes before the City Commission, and then we get to decide whether we agree with that or not. Ultimately, the City Commission did not agree. Clearly the goal that, and I actually agree, and I can see where the neighbors are coming from. It really was to preserve green space, not necessarily to preserve the buildings, which and a lot of the structures, which most are not historic. So historic preservation designation isn't set up to be a green space or park preservation program. So it, in my opinion, and my colleagues on the commission agreed with this, that it really wasn't the appropriate process. With that being said, the county is working on setting up a committee with neighbors where they want to talk about what can we do to make sure that we're being good neighbors and that you still have access to the playground and green space. However, in the future, there may be additional changes to the zoo, and we want to make sure that we work together. So that's ultimately why the City Commission voted it down.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does. And thank you for catching me up on that. I also heard another piece that there was something about trying to designate a tree within the green space at the park, at the zoo, as like a protected species.
Oh. Well, that would probably go through our Urban Forest Committee. And there is a process for designating trees.
But if you're not familiar with it,
yeah,
maybe
I'm not familiar. I mean, we have
commission.
other designated trees in our city. There's a beautiful one at one of our cemeteries, but I'm not familiar with that, and that would probably go through a separate process.
Okay, yeah, that was my understanding, was that it was kind of like a second attempt to do
to protect
similar.
the trees.
Yeah,
and I agree with that. My hope is that, again, the city doesn't own the property. The county's actually done a fabulous job managing the zoo, and in my opinion, creating an asset in our community. There years ago, there was a push to move the zoo out of the city and out to the Beltline, and the residents didn't favor that. They said, we want it here in the city. And so we want to be good partners to make sure that as the zoo grows, we can support that and also be thoughtful because it is in the middle of a neighborhood. I mean, there's industrial space on one side, but you have a lot of residents and neighbors on the other two sides. So my philosophy is there's a way for us to work through challenges like this as a community, and I do believe that the county is committed to doing that and to working with the neighbors, hearing their concerns and trying to rectify them and find some consensus where they can.
Great, well thank you for filling us in. I know it's been a complicated issue, but a lot of folks are talking about it, so glad that we made space for it. Well, it's about time for our first break now. When we come back, Mayor Bliss will be talking with Allison Farole, the Emergency Management Administrator for the City of Grand Rapids. Stay tuned.
For over 30 years after humble beginnings as a public access TV station, the Community Media Center has grown to be an active, multi-platform media and technology assistance organization, encouraging and enabling our community to push their creative boundaries. We power a variety of resources, including a music-centered community radio station, WYCE, a community venue with stage and screen at Wealthy Theater, citizen-driven journalism with the Rapidian, a web development team empowering local nonprofits, an education department that trains and broadens students' minds, and a free speech public access television studio, GRTV, where it all began. By introducing audiences to new voices and ideas, we enhance community engagement and create connections between artists and audiences, enriching our city's cultural offerings. We empower and collaborate with platforms and resources accessible to all and used by all. Every free democratic society depends on media, accessible to the community and uncensored by government. The Community Media Center continues this.
I was actually just
over. I remember it.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Tomorrow.
I lost power.
These platforms and services empower our neighbors to tell their stories and explore the richness of culture that Grand Rapids has to offer. Connect, discover, learn, create, and share. The Grand Rapids Community Media Center.
Hello and welcome back. Glad to have with me today Allison Farole, our emergency manager.
Yep.
Did I get your title right?
It's close. It's close enough.
What, fill me in.
It's Emergency Management Administrator.
Emergency Management Administrator.
But I'm the emergency manager in general, so that's shortened up. It makes sense.
So whenever we have an emergency in our city, Allison is involved in setting up the operating system, like the pulling everybody together for our. Remind me what it's called.
Yeah, it's the Emergency Operations Center.
Operating Center.
Yep.
Thank you. So many acronyms.
I know.
And helps coordinate not just the city of Grand Rapids' response, but if it's countywide, you're also engaged in countywide.
We work with the county.
Crisis response.
Definitely. Yep. Yeah, we have really good partnership with the county. But yeah, a lot of anything we have major disasters, flooding, tornadoes, civil unrest, things like that, is really where we have to do a lot of coordination. So it's not just running that EOC, but a lot of preparedness work that goes into it, writing plans, doing training, exercising, lots of things that go into this work.
All the fun stuff.
All the fun stuff.
So with the increase in severe weather events, with a number of crises that we've seen in other cities, we need to be prepared. So your position was created actually, about 4 years ago?
2019, correct.
Yeah, 2019.
Yeah.
So you've been here about
4 years.
4.5 years.
Yeah.
4 years. So let's talk about a couple things.
Sure.
First, for folks who never thought about wanting to be an emergency management administrator, why don't you first talk about your background, kind of what brought you to where you are today.
Yeah.
Then we'll talk about the scope of the work that you do.
Okay.
And then we'll talk about some current issues like with FEMA being here and a number of other things that people should be aware of.
Most definitely.
But let's start with you. So,
sounds good.
For all those young minds out there who are like, oh, maybe that's a job I would like.
Yeah, honestly, emergency management is a cool career field. I love it. I stumbled upon it. It wasn't a thing that in high school was like, ooh, I'm going to be an emergency manager. It's not. That's what I want to do. Actually, I have a broadcasting background. I have a bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism. Originally wanted to be a political correspondent. That was my dream and my goal. Went to school in undergrad for that, did internships with ABC News, NPR, did a lot of PR work for some nonprofits, things like that. But really just, and then after I graduated undergrad, I decided I wanted to teach kids in a non-traditional environment for a year. Originally it was the Peace Corps, was looking into that, and then made a decision to move to Alabama Huntsville, Alabama, to teach at the Space and Rocket Center. So,
Nice.
closet space nerd, got to help teach kids about space through Space Camp. So I did that.
How fun.
It was a lot of fun. Probably one of the best years of my life, actually. But through that, I actually got to help with a camp called Be Ready Camp. And so at the time, Alabama was really investing in educating their youth about being prepared. This is post-Katrina time frame. So there was a lot of investment in getting education out to the youth about how to be ready for hurricanes. So they developed this program called Be Ready Camp, where kids were able to spend a whole week learning about being prepared. They got to put on a mock disaster drill, work with first responders. So it was really neat to be able to be part of that. And that was really the time that I was like, this is a really cool thing to do. I love this. This is fun. It was interesting. And so I'm like, what is this? And so it's really what sparked my interest. And through time, I ended up moving to Virginia, where I went to grad school to get my master's in public administration and worked my way into the door in the Charlottesville, Virginia Emergency Management Office. Volunteered for their community emergency response team, got on that board, and before you knew it, I was running their office as the lead emergency manager. So, and then 4 years ago, made a decision to take the leap of faith and come up here to Grand Rapids and help Grand Rapids build their own emergency management program. So it's been fun.
What a fun journey.
Yeah.
That reminds me. So I may have told you this in the past. I went to University of South Alabama down in Mobile, and I remember while I was down there was a hurricane, and they closed down campus and evacuated folks. And me from Michigan, I'd never been in a hurricane before.
Definitely.
Had absolutely no idea what to do, how bad. I thought, it can't be that bad. I mean, we're kind of removed from the coast, you know. It was quite the learning experience. Yeah. I wish I would have gone through a class to say when a hurricane comes, these are things you should know.
It's interesting. Yeah, emergency management's a wild ride, but it's been a fun adventure dealing with a lot of unique incidents in my career. I've been doing this for almost 11 years actually. This month is when I started 11 years ago. So it's been interesting. It's been a lot of fun. I will say that if folks that are looking, or high school students, college students that are looking for a career field that's really keeps you on your toes, and every day is different, and you find a lot of things fascinating, this is really a good field for that. Because
I would say that your job and my job.
Yeah, definitely.
If you want to run for mayor,
100%.
Different every day.
Yeah, you have to know a little bit about everything to be a good emergency manager and a mayor. So yeah, definitely, it's been fun.
How fun.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. So for folks who have no idea what happens in your department, talk a little bit about the scope of your work.
Sure.
Because you do, as you said, both proactive work as well as when there is a crisis, you go into response mode.
Yeah. There's a lot of misnomers around what emergency management is. And, a lot of folks think it's very response oriented, and that's actually a very small sliver of what I do. So running that emergency operations center is actually a very small piece of it. We have to do a lot of work to be ready to be able to do that. So on a sunny day like today, I'm writing plans. I have coordination meetings, coordinating training for not only our public safety folks, but for anyone that would have a role in a response or recovery effort. Hosting and facilitating exercises. So we do what we call exercises with public safety folks and other stakeholders in our community to make sure folks are able to build those relationships, talk through how they would respond and coordinate to a potential incident, really trying to identify where those gaps are so that we can close those gaps through training, planning, if we need to hire more people, if we need to get different equipment, whatever it needs to be to figure that out. So there's a lot of work that goes in between that before something happens. We also do a lot of public education. So there's also an emergency management specialist in my office who now we have a social media account. We are out in the community trying to educate through different community organizations. We also kicked off our first CERT program this last fall.
Which is awesome.
So we have our community emergency response team, which is where we're teaching community members not only how to be prepared for themselves, and to give them those skills, but to also where we have a cadre of skilled and vetted folks that we can call upon to come and help if we need their help. And then recovery happens, which honestly lasts forever. There's a lot of paperwork. I apply for a lot of grants to get funding for different projects and things like that. If we have FEMA here, like we do right now, which we'll talk about, that actually becomes like a meeting and paperwork trail to it, but that's recovery, so there's a lot with that. Yeah.
Well, let's touch on that, but then after the break, maybe provide more details.
Sure.
We only have a couple of minutes left. I think a good segue is that, and I should say it's timely because we do have FEMA here.
We do.
So in our city, many of us remember last August we had a severe, significant storm with a lot of damage.
Correct.
Many communities were impacted. We recently received federal designation.
Correct.
As a disaster, and so we have our federal partners from FEMA here in town right now, connecting with folks and letting them know how they can apply for support if they were impacted.
Correct.
So.
Yeah, definitely. FEMA's in town. We got a presidential declaration a couple weeks ago. And this is really focused on individual assistance. So it's helping residents and business owners on some type of financial assistance for that. And some folks say, well, it took so long, and sometimes it's a long process, but they're...
Welcome to the federal government.
Correct. But it happens, and we're here, and we're able to try and see what we can do to help our community members.
Yeah, and we'll talk about how you could connect, make sure that you are registered.
Most definitely.
And we'll get more information out there after the break. So
Sounds
with that, we'll take a little bit of a break and come back and learn more from Allison.
Perfect.
Welcome back to City Connection. If you're just now tuning in, I'm Allison Donahue, and in this segment, Mayor Bliss and Allison Farole, the Grand Rapids Emergency Management Administrator, will be taking questions and submissions from viewers like you. There's still time to take part in the conversation. Just send your questions to cityconnection@grcmc.org or submit them through the Rapidian's Instagram story @the Rapidian. But before we go there, I think there's a few more details we want to wrap up from the last segment. Sure. One of them is how to get involved with FEMA, and is there a deadline that folks should know about?
Yeah, so as mentioned, FEMA's in town. This is in response to the August 24th storm we had last summer. And so pretty much at this point, anybody that is a resident or owns a business in the city of Grand Rapids should go through the application process of seeing if they qualify for any type of financial assistance through this declaration. So that's really important for them to just get their information in the system and really go through the eligibility process, because there is a deadline to at least get into the system, and that's April 8th. And once that deadline passes, that opportunity kind of goes away. So you may think, well, I only had a little bit of trees down, or just a tiny bit of damage on my roof, but insurance I think covered most of it. Go in and still apply, and at least go through the process to confirm if you're eligible or not, so you're not missing out on any type of opportunity. And where they can do this is through two ways. There's a website called disasterassistance.gov, and there's also a phone number, which is the 1-800-621-3362. All this information is available on the Office of Emergency Management's social media pages, and there's also, if you just go into FEMA.gov, you can find it through there as well. But it's really important to make sure that we get folks to understand that if you literally just live or own a business in the city, go in and apply and see what you can get out of it.
Great, and that deadline again was April 8th, so you just have just a little bit over a month.
Correct. Yep.
And then one more thing, just to tighten up all the loose ends from last segment. How can folks get involved with the Community Emergency Response Team, and is there a deadline for that?
Yeah, good question. So the Community Emergency Response Team, or otherwise known as CERT, is a newly formed volunteer program that's being run through the Office of Emergency Management. Just kicked it off last fall. And so we have a new class coming up here in the next week or so. But we're going to be doing these every spring and fall. So there's going to be opportunity at least twice a year to get through this program and get training through this. To find information about that, you can go to the city's website and go to the emergency management webpage through the city's website. I know the classes that start next week are full right now, but that's okay. We're going to continue to offer this. So there's still more time to do this. And really, anybody that's looking for an opportunity to, learn about how they can be more prepared, get some skills on how to take care of themselves, their family, their neighbors, that is a big part of this training. The other critical piece of this CERT program is to be able to train a cadre of volunteers in the community who we can call upon if we need help. So we all want to help when a major disaster happens in our community. That's just human nature. But it's really important for us to make sure that we have folks that are trained and vetted, and we know what skills they have, so that we can properly put them in roles to really help us in a timely fashion. So it's really important for them to become associated through this program so that they can be properly called upon in an organized fashion if we need them. So a lot of this information can be found on the Office of Emergency Management's webpage through the city's website. And we will be happy to answer any questions through that.
Great. So if you want to get involved, it looks like you have until the fall before you can take another class. But
yeah,
sign up, because those classes seem to fill up pretty fast.
They do. Yeah, there's a wait list always. So please send us your information and we'll get you on the wait list.
Yeah. And I would say I now, having served for as long as I have and lived through a number of severe weather events, I really appreciate when people want to step up and help. And so we want to make sure that, one, if you're willing to help after a severe event or a crisis, we want to make sure that, we can find a spot for you, but
Yep.
it is super helpful that we're being proactive to make sure that people have the skills to be as effective as they can.
Definitely.
Well, thank you for humoring me with those few questions, but we do have some questions from the public,
Okay.
if we're ready to take those. This first one is from Adrian. Adrian asks, where does the Office for Emergency Management get its budget? Is it mostly federally funded or through city taxes?
It's a great question. So the Office of Emergency Management is currently housed within the fire department. So we have our own program budget. And it's kind of a mix between grant funding and general fund funding. So it's a mixture of both. We do have a grant that we have that we were able to receive last year from FEMA to help fund a position, and the CERT program is being funded through that and some other things. And then pretty much everything else is through city taxes, I guess you would say, through general fund.
Yep.
But there's always, we're always looking for other opportunities through grant funding to try and augment our programming to any which way we can.
Great. This next question comes from Grant. Isn't much of the risk from emergencies covered by insurance? For instance, businesses and houses in a flood zone would be covered in case of a flood. Why are my tax dollars being used to subsidize insurance claims?
Another great question. So one thing that is really important for residents to understand, so that's your homeowner or a renter, is part of being prepared is understanding your level of insurance. So if you own a home, figure out, do you live in a flood zone, all right? If you live in a flood zone, most likely if you have a federally backed mortgage, you are required to have flood insurance, okay? But if you don't live in a flood zone, you are not required to have flood insurance. However, we are finding that regardless of if you live in a flood zone or not, it's really important to have flood insurance because homeowners insurance in general will not cover flood damage, okay? Same thing with renters. If you're a renter, having renter's insurance is really important. Yes, it doesn't cover the actual building you reside in because that is the responsibility of the property owner. But if there is some type of disaster, maybe a tree comes through the roof or breaks your windows and damages your property inside, your renter's insurance can help you recover from that. Now, there's a lot of details and stipulations within insurance as far as levels of insurance and what it covers and what it doesn't cover. So it's really important to know your level of risk through that. And then as far as the Office of Emergency Management goes, it's a completely different ballgame actually. So what we're doing is the office is really not only in charge of doing that education piece to our residents, but we're in charge of a lot of other things too. So we do a lot of coordination with our public safety partners, our government partners, stakeholders, to make sure that we have the tools to be able to respond to help people when they're being faced with a disaster. And also help to coordinate what's happening on the recovery side too. One thing that's talked a lot about in the emergency management world is that all disasters start and end local. And regardless of how big and bad it is, regardless if FEMA is here, it all starts and ends local because this is our community. So it really is important to have insurance, good insurance as a personal preparedness piece, but also you need the Office of Emergency Management at a government level to help with that coordination in a lot of different ways for public safety and other stakeholders to make sure we can help you.
And I would, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding as well is that small business owners are also eligible.
Yep.
And they, yes, have insurance, but there could have been losses that are not reimbursed by the insurance. So like if I'm a restaurant owner and I lose all the food in my freezer or fridge, my insurance company is not going to cover that, or it might not cover that. Typically it doesn't. And so there are opportunities to recoup some of the costs for those businesses that just aren't covered. And we want our small businesses, obviously, to be able to get through a disaster and recoup some of those losses.
And that's a great example.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, yes, FEMA's in town, but it's very hard to get a presidential declaration. So when this happens, as far as having that opportunity to at least see what you can get recouped if insurance didn't cover something or you had an economic loss on your business, this is your opportunity to be able to see what you can do to get that reimbursed to you, to help you recover your business or get back on your feet or make you whole. So it's definitely a public-private partnership in a lot of ways in the whole aspect of before, during, and after disaster.
And I'm just going to repeat that April 8th deadline
Yes.
one more time, because maybe there's a small business owner out there who's like, I did lose a freezer full of food last August.
Yeah, like it could be about you lost power, so you lost food. Even as a homeowner, if you had just gone grocery shopping the day before and you lost power for 3 days, which there was residents that did, and you lost all your food, apply, because you can probably get reimbursed for those groceries you had just spent money on the day before. So those are the little things of why it's really important for folks to really understand. You may not think of, I wasn't really impacted, or you may have forgot these little details. Just go and apply. At least you get in the system, work through the process, and you can then find out yes or no if you can get anything back.
Great. I think if this one is quick, we can take one more question from the public. This one's from Alicia. Does the Office of Emergency Management plan for tech emergencies such as electrical grid shutdown due to hacking?
Yes, definitely. So we cover natural, human-made, and technological. So technological would be covering that cyber attack or a grid failure. And that could be a combination of human-made disasters as well with that. But yes, all the things. Anything that's really big that can impact our community as far as being able to operate, our way of our economy, just our everyday life. We are definitely talking and preparing and planning for with all different types of stakeholders for that.
And I think one concrete example, some people may remember this, several years ago when we had an issue at our steam plant downtown, which impacted a huge portion of downtown having access to heat. And so we had a number of issues, because then you have the fear of pipes freezing and water damage, and it was challenging.
That was definitely, yes, it was. I was like, I don't remember that one.
I remember getting the call, but I don't remember you being here.
Nope, I was not here.
It sounds like you have to wear a lot of hats at in your
Most
department,
definitely, yes. It's
being prepared for any kind of emergency seems tough.
really definitely thinking through all the potentials is pretty much what I do every day. So, yep.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm glad somebody is.
It's about time to head into another break, but when we return, we'll be taking more questions from the community. Stay tuned.
It's morning in Grand Rapids. Do you know what's going on in your city? Stay informed about what's happening in your community with The Rapidian, your source for hyperlocal news and information. The Rapidian is a community-focused news source powered by local residents like you. Our volunteer writers and reporters create content that hits close to home about topics like local government, business, schools, events, and people. The Rapidian goes beyond the headlines to provide in-depth coverage of issues that affect Grand Rapids directly, so you can stay in the know. We aim to uplift the community by sharing positive, inspiring stories of growth, progress, and neighborhood pride. The Rapidian is your neighborhood newspaper for the digital age. Follow us on our website and social media to stay connected to your community. This is The Rapidian.
we're back. Here with us on City Connection is Mayor Bliss. Thank you so much to Allison Farole, the Grand Rapids Emergency Management Administrator, for joining us the last few sections here on City Connection. But we have more questions from viewers like you, so let's get into it. This is actually a question that is saved from last month.
Okay.
But want to make sure that they have the chance to ask it. And I believe it's a little bit long, so stick with me for a second.
All right.
So Grand Rapids does not have the tax revenue to cover the replaceable value of our road, water, the sewer assets, the most basic of municipal budget line items. We're looking at a huge cost per household to replace systems that were developed in the 1950s through 1970s. If that cost was $16,000 per household per year, that would bankrupt a family at 30% of the AMI. Our sprawl is expensive. This is exactly the type of predicament the nonprofit Strong Towns talks about. We have insufficient density for the needed tax revenue per household per year. How is this being addressed through our land use policies?
Okay, so a couple things. Let me try to get to the crux of that, which is about funding for infrastructure. And the city of Grand Rapids. So the city of Grand Rapids, we are largely a built-out city. So we don't have portions of our city where we don't already have infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the city of Grand Rapids, we're about a 45 square mile city. We have over about 560 miles of roads. You double that for sidewalks, although we have some gaps in the system for sidewalks that we're working on. And we actually do have a really robust asset management plan for our water and sewer and streets. Now those are two separate pots of money. So the water and sewer system that's paid for with user fees. It's called our enterprise fund. And we plan out investments in that fund. We actually get quite a bit of grant funding for that as well. And we use revolving fund. But our water and sewer system, they're actually in pretty good shape. So about 30 years ago, the city invested over $300 million to separate out our sewer system. We're one of the few cities in the state of Michigan where we have a completely separated sewer system, which has prevented the overflow that we used to have in our Grand River decades ago that no longer exists because we have a separated system. You know, we're replacing lead pipes, but we have a really robust asset management plan for our water and sewer infrastructure. We're not adding on to that system in the city because it's largely built out. So that's not necessarily an issue in a city like ours, just a densely populated city that's already built out. On streets, we have a dedicated streets millage, which takes a portion of our income tax every single year and goes towards our streets. That is coupled with the funds that we get from the state, from our fuel taxes, and some of the sales tax from the state. And so we do have revenue set up, and we also have an asset management plan for our streets. We have a group called Vital Streets Oversight Commission. They work with our city staff to look at priority projects. We're investing in all of our sidewalks in every single neighborhood to make sure that they are safe. We have a list of areas in our city where we know that we need to add sidewalk, and that's every year we're ticking off that list. It doesn't happen overnight, but we have a 5, 10, 15-year plan. So if you go to the city's website, you can find all of our asset management plans for all of our infrastructure. We also have one for our primary circuit. We have one, we're investing in street light conversions. And so we actually, unlike some cities that I would say do extend out their utilities and for, I'd say, greenfield development, that doesn't necessarily happen in the city of Grand Rapids.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And a lot of that question was a comment too. So I'm glad they were able to speak directly to you because that's the point of our show.
Exactly. It's a good question. And it is confusing because you do hear about that in other cities that are just geographically structured different than ours, where they still have a lot of green space that don't have connecting utilities. So you have a development that goes out to that space, and they as a city or a township, they decide to support the extension of those utilities out to that new location, and it can be costly. I think they make a very good point. I think it's tied to a lot of the conversations that have happened in our larger community around, farmland preservation, green space preservation, and then it goes back into the larger issue around urban sprawl.
Gotcha. Yeah. This next question is from Greg. Greg asks, and comments here, parking is already a huge issue downtown. What is the city's plan for parking as they're considering the new soccer stadium?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like I talk about parking every single week. And parking is, there are challenges with parking. But if you look at the city as a whole, both on all of the west side as well as downtown, and you count the number of opportunities for parking and parking spaces and street parking and other opportunities, private parking, Ellis parking lots, we do have a significant amount of parking. I think the challenge that some people have is they want parking really, really close to wherever they're going to be. What we know about cities, especially growing cities and big cities, any of us who've gone to Chicago or you name any big city, sometimes you have to park and walk 5, 6, 8 blocks to get to wherever you want to go. And I don't think that is the culture here. Like, we're very used to parking in really close proximity to wherever we go. I think the city, and quite frankly in partnership with the Rapid, we've tried to create opportunities for people to park one place and use the dash. We did that whole reroute of the dash to make it a circular route. We have the Laker line, we have the Silver line, but specifically to the west side. So some of the conversations with soccer has been, how do we have partnerships with places that have a lot of parking that can be utilized during those events that are going to sell out. And if you look at the west side, even if you look at an aerial view, you have a lot of parking that Grand Valley currently has. So if we're able to utilize that space during games, there's thousands of parking spaces. You also have the multi-level parking ramp that's kind of kitty corner from the Y. We are talking about adding a parking ramp closer to Bridge Street, which would also be available. So I think as you see the plans kind of get solidified, you'll start to see some of these partnerships with places that already have significant parking availability that we'll be able to use. We do that at the Van Andel Arena, right? There's a number of asphalt parking lots around the Van Andel that get utilized during events. So it's a very common practice. So it's, I know some people want thousands of parking spots added to that space. Adding significant parking isn't always the best answer when you already have the availability of parking spaces in close proximity.
Will there be any changes to public transportation to maybe encourage folks to take that route to get to these soccer games?
Yeah, I think some of that is probably premature because we don't know exactly when they'll be, and some of it is just logistics. But I can tell you we do some of that already when there's large events downtown. We'll add so you probably have seen like the trolley going around or other types of micro mobility options going around. And then also, we've seen utilization of the scooters and the e-bikes as well, where people will drive and they'll park someplace close to like an e-bike or an e-scooter station, and then they'll come in and drop the scooter close by. We see that actually a lot with the Van Andel Arena. So again, we see it at Studio Park as well. So we'll be able to start to monitor utilization, and that could be another option for folks.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. One more question, I believe we have time for. So this one comes from Jenny. Jenny asks, climate change is creating increasingly erratic weather and living situations. It is above 70 degrees today, so I understand. How is this changing the city's approach to emergencies?
Oh, that's a great question. I share with you the concern about climate change. The city's invested a lot into becoming more resilient, environmentally resilient and sustainable. We work closely and partner with the Community Collaboration on Climate Change. We've created our own goals. We're looking at climate adaptation. All of that is important work. But quite frankly, one of the reasons that we created the position around emergency management is for that very reason. We started to see these severe weather events that happen more often and are more severe. And we knew that we needed to better plan for those. And so we're doing it, but we're also doing it in partnership with a lot of other cities around us and the county, because I think it's unfortunately just the reality of where we are right now, and will likely only get worse, unfortunately. Yeah.
Well, that is all the time that we have today. Thank you so much for being on another episode of City Connection. It's always great when you're in studio with us. And thank you to our guest, Allison Farole, for coming in and answering some of our questions as well. And thank you, of course, to all of you at home for tuning in and sending in your questions. Don't forget, you can always watch rebroadcasts throughout February on cable GRTV's Channel 25, or find us on the GRTV YouTube page. See you next month.
It's morning in Grand Rapids.
The Grand Rapids Community Media Center is committed to creating a diverse and inclusive environment for all community members. It is a place where community voices are heard, valued, and lifted through media. We seek to provide area residents with a platform to participate in free speech, be engaged with the community, and share their diverse voices. As a multimedia platform organization, we provide and support a variety of community resources, including our radio station, WYCE 88.1 FM, our TV station, GRTV, our hyper-local news program, The Rapidian, web services, and our historic theater, Wealthy Theater.
WYCE is West Michigan's only community radio station that is listener-supported and volunteer-powered. WYCE uses local voices to help listeners discover and celebrate different services, cultures, and events. What I really like about programming music in WYCE is I get to not only interact with listeners and local musicians, but I get to put together a musical collage every week and give it away to the universe. As a volunteer programmer, you get the training on how to use equipment, how to access music from the library, and how to put together a great show that showcases local and national artists and still has your creativity included.
The Web Services Department helps West Michigan nonprofits connect, learn, create, and share through locally built and accessible websites. We help nonprofits strengthen their online presence by developing one-of-a-kind websites tailored to their specific needs. The Web Services team can take care of all the technical needs of getting a new site up and running, including website hosting, domain name registration, theme development, and page layout. Websites are built with accessibility and responsiveness in mind, making sure our projects are available on any screen and accessible to people of all abilities. We are passionate about helping organizations in the nonprofit sector effectively communicate their stories online, promoting equity and media access with our affordable services.
Wealthy Theater is a historic theater on the southeast side of Grand Rapids. It was built in 1911, and today it stands as a performing arts center, historic cinema, and community venue. We provide a space for community connection. where community members can get together, enjoy different shows and different events. From concerts to comedy, musicals, theater, film screenings, you name it. Anybody from the community can sign up to be a member and rent one of our spaces to host their event. We have a staff here at the theater that helps make all the events here happen, as well as a great community of volunteers. The goal is to bring the community together, bring audiences together, artists together, create experiences where those two can connect. Whether you're an audience member who wants to come see a show, or you're somebody who wants to put on a show, Wealthy Theater is a space for you.
The Rapidian is a hyper-local news source powered by, for, and of the people of Grand Rapids, Michigan. We launched in 2009 using funds from local organizations and generous donors, and this community-driven platform empowers residents to share their stories, post articles, and keep track of local events and issues. By emphasizing citizen journalism, the Rapidian provides a unique grassroots perspective and a vital news service for the residents of Grand Rapids. In 2023, we are relaunching the Rapidian with the Grand Rapids Documenters program, where we train and pay local citizens to cover public meetings, empowering residents with the tools and resources to strengthen the news media landscape in Grand Rapids and become more civically engaged.
GRTV airs public access television programming made by and for the Grand Rapids community, amplifying their voices to support a diverse and vibrant democracy. We provide the tools, training, and broadcast platform for free speech. Community members can take classes on video and production features, borrow professional equipment, editing software, and use of our studio facilities to create their own content. We help community members connect, learn, create, and share.